We're joined now by Steve Bruere, the president of People's Company, talking to you, Steve, the day after the Land Expo, where you had to deal with something that you haven't really had to do in all of these years you've been doing this, and that's a big snowstorm. What was going through your head?
Yeah, Dave, I appreciate that. It was a little stressful this year. We've hosted the event for 17 years, and we've had some flurries, we've had some cold temperature, but I think they ended up calling this a record snow event for Des Moines, and so we have a lot of guests that were flying in from out of town, and then a lot of folks that travel in throughout the Midwest to the event, and so we were nervous about it, but part of the benefit of going through this similar kind of thing in COVID is that we'd set up a great virtual platform for the event. And so we were able to get a lot of folks in town a couple of days early. All of our speakers, with the exception of Undersecretary Robert Bonney, made it in. And so we were able to pull it off. I think we served over 650 lunches. So we ended up getting several people who braved the storm and got out. And then the virtual side of things, I think we had 800 folks watching the expo virtually. So we pulled it off, but yeah, there was a little anxiety there.
What goes into putting together the speakers for this? You have a couple of dozen people who end up speaking either in one of the main sessions or one of the breakout rooms. How do you decide year to year what the topics are?
Yeah, that's always interesting process. You know, we try to bring in folks that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have had an opportunity to hear that aren't on the normal traveling circuits for agriculture. So we try to bring in a big name that's a household name but has some sort of tie to agriculture or farmland. And then we try to bring in, somebody that is an economist, somebody that's got more of a geopolitical view of the world. Maybe some policy folks. This year we tackled foreign farmland ownership and had a panel on that. And what we do is we just kind of pay attention of what's happening in the industry, and as we get closer to the event, we continue to just kind of hone in on what we want to have as keynote speakers. But it's definitely a process. We've set the date for the 2025 Land Expo, and we're already working on lining up speakers for that event. So it's a year-long event, planning it.
Some of these events go on at the same time, so you can't get into every one of them, but clearly you got to listen to the bulk of them. You're involved in a variety of different industries across the agriculture and real estate spaces, and I'm curious what you personally learned from some of these experts you brought in.
It's probably as much about what you learn just networking with people at the event, and the speakers are, sometimes they're inspirational, and you just pick up a few tidbits, but we actually host some dinners and spend some time with the folks, and you get to know them personally, and so learning more about them. Last night we were able to have some drinks with Esther George and Tom Honig from the Kansas City Fed, and so when you can get into some of those sidebar conversations and ask some questions that maybe they wouldn't answer the same way in front of a room full of people, that's when you can really pick up some interesting tidbits.
And with those two in particular, you're talking about decades of experience in financial policy. So as we've now begun 2024, that means you survived 2023 with higher inflation rates than anybody wants, higher interest rates than anybody wants. So as now the calendar is turned, what are you looking for, and how do you assess where things stand right now?
Yeah, so Tom was fascinating to talk to. He was the Kansas City Federal Reserve president going back to the 1980s. He served under Paul Volcker, then he served under Alan Greenspan, and then under Ben Bernanke. And so he really saw it all, and resided over the Kansas City Fed during the 80s farm crisis. And then Esther George served as the president during the COVID years. And so, that perspective going back to the early 80s and through COVID, when talking to them, I think they're really concerned about monetary policy in the United States, rightfully so. Inflation is a big issue in our world. Prices of commodities inflate and farmland inflates, but then when they come in behind that with higher interest rates, then that could have a negative impact on farmland values and other real estate values. And so 2023, we lived through the interest rates rising on unprecedented levels to offset inflation. And now as we head into 2024, we're hoping there's some stability there, that interest rates are maybe done going up. I know there's talks of a rate cut or two. So that's really what we're keeping our eye on, and we're struggling with that, because if you're using debt to acquire farmland, returns for Iowa farms are 2.5 to 3, and if you're paying 8% for your money and you're getting 2.5 or 3 back, you don't have to be real smart to know that math doesn't work real well. And on the other side of it, if you're an investor buying farmland and you can go get a T-bill for 5 or 5.5 versus farmland at 2.5 or 3, you've now got an alternative place that you can put your money. So the interest rate impacts are scary and they're real, and so we're watching it closely.
But so in light of that, does your gut tell you that 24 should be a little easier, even if the Fed doesn't make substantial cuts this year?
I hope so. I think, at the last Fed meeting, they said, hey, anticipate 2 rate cuts in 2024. And so at a minimum, that is better than hearing expect rates to go up in 2024. So, I think if we can stabilize, there's times last year you didn't know if interest rates were going to 9, 10, 11%. And so I think the consensus view right now is that they're going to remain stable and hopefully come off a little bit. And if that's the case, I think the world will continue to function.
You lead a company that has had substantial growth over the last 2 decades, and it's an industry that has so many variables, and in a lot of cases, there's really nothing that you can do about those, right? So when you are the head of a company with so many employees depending on the company's success, how do you answer questions when they come to you about, hey, Steve, where are things going this year? What's this going to mean? What's that going to mean? How do you provide those answers?
Yeah, it's we're in the transactional business, and so when the market adjusts, transactions tend to slow down, and so we've come off of a couple unprecedented great years with low interest rates and transactional volumes that were at all-time highs, and so there is some anxiety around the office. The appraisal volume for our firm was down in 2023. Our brokerage volume was down in 2023. And all you can really control is what you can control. And so it doesn't do any good to worry about those things that are out of your control. And usually when the market adjusts, it creates a new opportunity somewhere else that you maybe weren't anticipating. And so we're just trying to encourage folks to, be positive and go hustle. And there's deals to get done and transactions to get done. You might just have to change the way you approached it for a few years. And, those adjustment periods, I remember in 2008 when the financial crisis hit, our firm went 6 months without completing a real estate transaction. And so we've lived through some of those environments where the market just kind of freezes up and it's trying to figure out which way the wind's blowing. And there was a little of that in 2023 when these interest rates really started to move. So yeah, we're just, trying to help our team understand that, that it's normal cycles, and when the market adjusts, you got to hunker down. And then when you come out of that, there will be business to be done.
Are you noticing certain trends in that particular producers are really struggling with the future of their industries? And I guess I'm thinking of maybe nut producers just as an example, but in light of that, we're seeing cases in different states where folks are maybe switching to something else, just completely giving up, whether it's the price return or because of water concerns, what have you. Does that then lead to geographical sections of our country that are more likely to see farmland turnover? Are you noticing
Yeah,
anything like that?
a little bit. Yeah. So we work in about 30 states across the country. And so anything from apples and wine grapes up in the Pacific Northwest, almonds and pistachios in California, and rice and cotton in the Mississippi Delta, and then of course corn and soybeans in the Midwest. And in the Midwest, it is corn and soybeans, and farmers had a good year in the Midwest. Prices were generally good, and yields were good, and farmers are going to make pretty good money. But when you get into some of these other regions, with inflation on labor and inflation on cost, some of these folks that are direct operating permanent crop assets like almonds and pistachios and wine grapes, those costs kind of outpace maybe the revenue. And so there's some real challenges in some of these permanent crop areas around the country where guys are farming unprofitably, and unlike the Midwest where maybe you can throttle back on fertilizer or throttle back on genetics a little bit, when you're managing a permanent crop asset, you got to manage it like you're trying to squeeze every ounce of yield out of it, because you don't want to permanently damage those trees, as a for instance. And so, yeah, there's some dislocations, and that is what's fun about our business, is that you get to have some diversity around what you work on, and you can kind of move around and adapt where things are maybe hot, and maybe where things are a little softer, and put resources into different things.
You mentioned that one of the best parts of the Land Expo is you get to have these private conversations, private time with some of your key speakers. This year, Drew Bledsoe, the former star quarterback for the New England Patriots, and he later played for the Bills and Cowboys, but primarily known for his success with the Patriots. But in his retired life as an athlete, he got into the wine business. That's something that your family's into as well. What kind of conversations do you have in that setting, since you both are trying to get into this and find success in that industry?
Drew was just a really fun guy to spend time with, just a real down to earth, Walla Walla, Washington country boy. And so it's fun to spend time with him. And he actually got into town early enough. We were able to go drive around and look at some properties. He'd never been to Iowa. And so you get to spend a little time with guys like that and pick their brain and learn about what they're up to. And he took a successful NFL career and then turned that into a successful wine business in Walla Walla, and he's making about 18,000 cases of wine now. And we shared a lot of notes. We've got a vineyard property that's just down the road from Drew's place in Walla Walla, and so tried a little of his wine, he tried a little of our stuff, and compared notes, and it was a lot of fun to be able to do that.
He revealed a lot about what they do on a day-to-day, and one of them sounds like it's perhaps a different way to go after this. He was addressing how tough it is to find what's usually temporary labor for what he needs. So instead, his operations have invested in year-round employment for the several dozen employees he has, retirement benefits, health benefits, all of that. Are you noticing anybody else in the industry really getting into this, or is he kind of ahead on this one?
He's definitely ahead. I mean, there's other folks that are setting up their own farming operations, and what you're talking about is there's a lot of labor crews that come in and do seasonal labor work on properties like vineyards. And Drew formed a farming company and made these folks full-time employees versus bringing in the temporary labor crews for seasonal work. And so it provides a lot of stability for their farming operation, and it provides a lot of stability for the folks that are working within it. Of course, it costs more money to do that, but I think what Drew was saying is, hey, if you treat the employees well, they're going to treat the property that they're managing like it's their own, and you're going to get return on that. That's hard to pencil when you're putting it in a spreadsheet. But it was fun to hear. It was fun to hear what he's doing there.
Just one of the fascinating conversations you get to be part of in the Land Expo. I would say enjoy the break, but we all know that you don't take breaks, but we appreciate the time.
Oh, thanks for covering it, Dave.